Wasteland Wednesday.
Land of the Dead is a 2005 American film, written and directed, of course, by George A. Romero, and stars Simon Baker, John Leguizamo, and Dennis Hopper. I'd really been wanting to rewatch this movie for a long time. Like, I saw it back in the theater. I remember thinking it was really cool. I remember really enjoying it, but I hadn't seen it since. And I'd been thinking about it recently. I'm like, I don't hear pretty much ever. I don't hear anyone talk about this movie. And so I figured, like, is it just my brain messing with me? Is it really not that good? Do I remember it being better than it is? But I rewatched it, man. I think it holds up. So it was the fourth installment in Romero's, Dead series, with the previous installment being Day of the Dead way back in 1985. So it'd been 20, exactly 20 years. The 90s was kind of a slow decade, as you probably remember, for zombie films, oddly enough. But the early 2000s, man, it was just the decade of the zombie. There was just a massive return to popularity. And Romero saw it as a perfect opportunity to, return to the genre that he helped create. I'm a big fan of George, but for me, this would be his last movie that I liked. And, I'm happy to say that because he still had some gas in the tank. Though I am bummed at the same time to say that I didn't like those last two movies that he did. But, yeah, maybe I'll rewatch those at some point, too. The setting is in Pittsburgh, Romero's city, of course, in the not super distant future. I don't think it says exactly what year it is. The name of the game here, though, is classism. With all the rich people going to live in this nice, fancy high-rise, of course, when everyone else has to live, in poverty in a village, basically. And let's be clear, this is exactly how this fucking shit would go down in reality. And Romero wants us to know that rich people are still trash. So in this universe, people have been dealing with zombies for quite some time at this point, and several protected cities have been established across the country. Kaufman, played by Dennis Hopper, is the leader of the town, and he's also the villain here because it's Dennis Hopper. And don't get me wrong, it is always cool to see Dennis Hopper show up, especially as a villain, because he always plays a great villain, in my opinion. But he's kind of dialed back here. We don't really get the Dennis Hopper from Blue Velvet, or Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, or even Waterworld. But to me, this isn't really a character-driven film anyways, so it works. In fact, I got to admit, there aren't any characters here. I know I probably sound like a broken record with a lot of movies that I watch, but there aren't really any characters here that I particularly liked. And that's a pretty big mark against this film for me. I mean, I get those early 2000s action movie vibes, with them, like Paul W.S. Anderson, type stuff, especially with our protagonists, a group of mercenaries working for Kaufman. Riley, played by Simon Baker, is the leader of the crew that uses a zombie assault type vehicle that they drive around, dangerous areas, zombie infected areas, looking for supplies, which makes sense. I feel like they like this vehicle thing is way too big of a it plays way too big of a part in this film. I think I never really understood that. I get it, as a plot piece. I don't really care about the vehicle, and it's called Dead Reckoning, by the way, which is cool. It does make sense to build something like that, since going out on foot would be, far too dangerous. But I feel like too much time is just, spent on them driving this goddamn thing around. Just my opinion. We do also have John Leguizamo playing Cholo, part of the crew. I think Leguizamo is kind of one note as an actor, but he's not a bad actor. Don't get me wrong. I do like the guy. He's got personality and charisma, tons of it. But he's typically just kind of playing himself in movies, I feel like. For me, though, the real stars here are the zombies themselves. I guess that isn't surprising, in a zombie film, but K&B effects, really put in the work here, in my opinion. Tons of great kills, great practical gore. This was 2005 after all, so, a little bit of CGI was used for some blood splatter, but it's not super distracting, and, I'm always going to be the guy that calls that shit out. It's not that bad. This is, from what I can see, a practical effects heavy film, and I appreciate it for that. to say the least. I mean, I don't know if it's a hot take either, but this film has some of the best zombie gore I think I've ever seen, and I'm not, again, I'm not sure why nobody ever really talks about this movie. My guess is, well, I think there's a number of reasons, but I digress. I always put it next to Zack Snyder's, Dawn of the Dead remake because it came out just a year prior. Although I do think that's a slightly better film overall, oddly enough. And what makes the zombies unique in this movie is that they seem to be evolving. Especially the one known as Big Daddy, who's my favorite, and he's teaching the others how to use like weapons and even guns and stuff like that. Tom Savini, Simon Pegg, and Nick Frost actually all cameo as zombies. Which, why is no one talking about that? That right there is enough reason to watch this movie. And to add to that, Tom Savini actually reprises his zombie cameo from was it Day of the Dead, or was it Day of the Dead? I think. Man, I forget. He plays a zombie. I think his name was like Chopper or something like that. It was either in Day of the Dead or Dawn of the Dead. Now I can't remember, but it doesn't matter. He reprises that role, and that's cool. And plus Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, who it's very cool. The title here was actually originally going to be Dead Reckoning, which I think was actually, or would have been super cool, since it not only nods to the end of the film, and it also, is also the name of the anti-zombie assault vehicle thing. It's called Dead Reckoning. So cool little fact there. The storyline set further out in time, after the zombie apocalypse, gives things more of a post-apocalyptic feel. Compared to the earlier films, not unlike 28 Days Later or The Walking Dead, I suppose. The world building was pretty decent, especially for a budget of like 15 to 19 million, which, by the way, was the most, from what I read, it was the most Romero ever had for one of his zombie films. I think it was the second biggest budget he ever worked with in his career too. So I'm giving Land of the Dead a 7 out of 10. Almost for the amazing gore alone. And in 2005, it was cool to see that George Romero, still fucking had it. And he did. The story isn't super interesting, I gotta say, but there's enough Romero-isms, to keep your attention, and a few clever moments, the ending especially. It's not the zombies that are the problem. It's these fucking billionaires, man. Cheers, guys, and I'll see you at the multiplex. Subscribe right now, please.